Hello, welcome back to the Flourish Podcast. My name is Michelle Holmes.
And I'm Devin. We're happy that you're here today. If you're watching this on the video version of the podcast, you might notice that I'm not in my normal environment. I'm actually recording out of a hotel today, or speaking out of a hotel today. I'm traveling. I'm on the road, and this is something that I do regularly. Part of my job is it evolves around a lot of travel, getting to meet different customers around the country. And we talked in a previous episode about how important it is to maintain your habits, your routines, even when the demands of work may force you to reprioritize the tasks within your day. We talked about things like the importance of getting enough sleep, the importance of nutrition, the importance of movement, the importance of connection, all of these things that despite the stress and demands of the day, we want to make sure that we're able to maintain so that we can keep that level of sanity and perform at the highest level possible. We recognize that this can be a challenge. And that challenge can be amplified when we're outside of our normal environment. It's one thing to do what you're used to doing, to have a routine when you have, say, an office that you go to on a regular basis, or an office at home that you're working out of. You have everything that you need where you need it. But when you're traveling, you're in a different location. You don't have all of the comforts of your home environment. And so it can add an extra level of stress, and it can be just that even more demanding to maintain the habits and the routines that are needed to perform at that highest level. So today we want to talk about just some tips, some different ways that we can stay on track when we're on the road. So home away from home, staying on track when you're on the road. And I'll ask Michelle, so you do travel as well, but do you enjoy traveling?
Yes, I do enjoy traveling mostly. Yes, I do enjoy traveling. As long as I do have some of my creature comforts, I will say that makes a really big difference for me.
Yeah.
I love seeing new places, and I love just kind of going. So yes, I do enjoy traveling.
Yeah, and there are certainly I think generally people enjoy kind of having those experiences, especially if you're not one who travels regularly. So there are going to be folks who, maybe you take one or two trips here, and we're not talking about, family vacations or things like that. Those hopefully are always very, very enjoyable, but we're talking about kind of the trips that you take as part of your work. So you're working outside of your normal environment. And so for many people, they enjoy that. And because they may not do it as regularly. So, like, for instance, when you were doing sales travel or such, how regularly were you outside of your home city where you had to fly away?
Right. Yeah, definitely a few times a year, not nearly as frequently as you. I don't think anyone travels more than you, other than like pilots and flight attendants.
Oh, that's not entirely true. Yeah. And
But
so,
yeah,
go
it
ahead.
was a couple of times. It wasn't enough to fully master and get into this travel routine. It was kind of like, okay, every time I would travel, I would kind of go back to the drawing board and try to remember, okay, how's this going to go to be successful?
Yeah, and I think you really hit it on the head. You talked about a travel routine. And so when you're not traveling regularly, it's actually, it's okay to kind of veer a little bit off of your routine, because it doesn't happen so frequently, and it won't have as detrimental an effect if, say, it only happens a few times a year. Everyone's going to have little, hiccups and things where they have to adapt and they have to change on that, on those rare occasions. But really what we're focusing more on the individuals where you're traveling regularly, where, we talk about maintaining routines even when you travel. Well, it's really, just as you'd mentioned, is developing and maintaining travel routines. So having different routines that you adopt and you stick to even when you travel. And so I think, when I asked you before, do you like traveling? Do you not like traveling? I think a lot of people, they like the travel, the experience, the opportunity to go out to different places, see different people, maybe see different attractions, eat different food, things like that. And so there's an excitement level to that. But I think there are certainly some things that make travel that add stress to travel. Things like dealing with airport security, just the packing and just the time that may seem like it's wasted going from place to place, whether it be even as simple as going from the airport to the rental car place and things like that, things that take up time, that take you away from what you're trying to do in your normal day. So what we need to do is really develop those travel routines, and as we do that, recognize the fact that everyone is different. Everyone responds to different environments differently. And so you have to figure out, like, what is your mindset? What are the things, understand what are the conditions under which you perform the best? And what are the things that are going to have the most impact on how well you perform? How do you deal with that stress? What causes that stress while you're traveling? When we're able to maintain, say, the regular routines that we want to go through, the routines that we're used to. And so it really comes down to taking kind of our normal set, kind of our baseline, and minimizing the deviations to that baseline. And that's going to reduce the stress and enable you to stay focused and maintain that level of energy that you need to succeed. So when I think about that, minimizing the deviations, there are decisions that you're going to have to make in terms of what is causing that stress. And I always think of it in terms of kind of, time and place. And so from a time perspective, if you're someone who is really, who gets anxiety over running late or not having enough time, or maybe missing a flight or missing a meeting, if the time aspect of something if that's something that really causes you a lot of stress, then you want to make sure that you find ways to minimize the impact that time can have on your schedule and on the stress level. So I'm talking about things like when you're booking your flights, is making sure that, if possible, to book direct flight so you don't have the mishaps of the transfers, and I've had my share of those. And you have flights that are conducive, that enable you to get where you need to be on time. I think that's a lot of the stress that I have, is when I know that I've got a meeting at a certain time. What if something happens and I'm, the flight's delayed or something? Is that going to add a level of stress? And so you've got to look at that from how you manage your flight. But then it also comes down to, and this is a question we talked a little bit about earlier, is other things that take up time. If time is an issue, you're trying to really be as efficient as possible with the time that you spend. One of the things that takes up a lot of time, I've had this discussion with a lot of coworkers and other folks who travel quite a bit, is, are you a light packer or are you an overpacker? And I'll just ask Michelle, what would you put yourself in that category? Are you a light packer or an
overpacker?
Overpacker.
Ask my husband; he'll tell you. No, so I have been known to pack very lightly, to travel just with a backpack or primarily a carry-on when I'm doing airport travel, because light packing, I think, is very helpful for me. But when I'm doing a road trip, I will pack my car full of the most luxurious items in my house. Like, I'm bringing my coffee maker, like our French press. I'm bringing, I've brought a juicer before when I was juicing. I bring my Sinupulse. It's like a nasal irrigator, so if you're trying to avoid colds. So I pack that baby full in the car because I have the space, and that's been really handy for me. But when I'm traveling by air, it's like carry on and I'm done. What about you?
So I am the opposite. Well, I mean, I'm an overpacker. I'm a notorious overpacker, and my coworkers make fun of me for overpacking.
because you are famous for bringing your guitars.
Yes, that's a topic that'll come later. That'll come later in our discussion. But the reason I overpack, so let's look at the pros and cons, right? By being a light packer, there are a lot of things that you're able to eliminate. You're eliminating having to check your bag. You're eliminating having to the risk, the thought, the dread, the anxiety over perhaps your bag getting lost. And then when you get off the airplane, you don't have to sit there and wait for, depending on the airport, it could be a half hour, it could be even longer until your bag finally shows up. And so if you want to be as efficient as possible, then you take just the carry-on. There are also, depending on your airline and depending on your status, I guess, there could be costs associated with baggage. And so for me, one of the reasons why, there are a lot of reasons why I overpack, and we'll get into that. But one of the things that I always get sort of concerned about is, depending on your airline and where you rank in their hierarchy of boarding. If you rely on just that carry-on, and maybe your connecting flight is delayed, or maybe you just have a very late boarding number or boarding position, there's that real risk that you're going to run out of overhead. And I don't know why. That really, for some reason, that really stresses me out, is the prospect of having to, because then there's that anxiety during the boarding process of, okay, am I going to board in time so that, by the time I get on, there is still space available for my bag. And so that's one of the reasons why I like to check a bag. But more so, it's because my bag is huge. And actually, it broke, so I have to get a new one. But I have usually had with me a luggage scale, so that I can weigh my bag, and I would determine as I pack what I can bring and what I can't, so that I keep under whatever limit is set by that airline. And usually it's 50 pounds, depending. Again, it could be 70, but yeah. So I'm an overpacker, and the reason why is because if you're someone who is really trying to, you want to be as efficient with your time, then the time is really what's key, and you don't want the stress of having to wait for your bag. So that's key. So for me, I accept the fact that even though I do get set about time, I plan my travel schedule that allows me to have kind of that buffer, that extra time, so that I can get my bag. And that allows me to pack everything I want. And really, I talked before about minimizing those deviations, right? So it's trying to maintain your routines when your environment is different. And the way I do that is by bringing things with me, like maybe not a juicer or a coffee maker, but bring things with me that allow me to maintain the routines that I have. And so I will bring, for instance, big question always comes up, like, are you bringing, your tennis shoes, your workout clothes? So I'll bring workout clothes. I don't always use them, but I have them. So I bring workout clothes. I know, as you'd reference, I bring a guitar with me. That's it. We'll talk more about that later. But I bring books. I bring, things that I need, not to get into details, but, just when I get ready in the morning, like all of my bag of toiletries and things, it's a pretty big bag. So just things that I bring, and what that does, it allows me, it makes me feel more at home. And so it allows me, as I go through my day, I can still do the things that I normally am used to doing, that I know need to, I can keep optimal performance. So I think one of the key things is figure out, what causes you to feel that stress. Is it the time? Is it just not having those comforts of home? And how is that going to impact your what you're doing and the purpose of the trip? Certainly, it's going to matter if it's a 2-day trip or a 1-day trip. Then there are things you can get away with not having, right? You can pack light. I have a coworker who I was shocked. We had meetings on Thursday, And then on Friday, he was flying out for a weekend trip. And I asked him, where is his bag? And all he had was a backpack. He had for I think a 3 or 4 day trip, he had a backpack.
That's
And I
all
was
you
blown
need.
away. I don't think my shoes would fit in a backpack. And I'm not okay. So I'm I don't just, there are things that, I like to have different shoes for different things that I'm going to be doing. So it's about, what is going to make you the most comfortable. And if making you more comfortable means that you have to check a bag, then you want to make sure that you schedule your travel around to allow that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There are a lot of great, I've seen a lot of, videos on YouTube about ultra light packers who can pack everything in, a duffel bag. And I've seen videos where they, you wash your clothes at the end of every day and hang them in your shower to dry. I will not do that. So, so look at what's important to you. And when you start looking at, we talked before about the routines, right? And if you remember, we talked about sleep, kind of exercise, but what are the things that I think it's important that you maintain when you're away from home is that sleep, your workflow, your exercise or kind of movement and downtime. So
Mm-hmm.
so those are sort of the things that are an important part of every day, regardless of where you're actually at. So when you're traveling, because of your schedule, depending on where you're traveling to, what meetings you have, what events you have to attend, things might get jumbled up, right? You may not be able to go for that run in the morning if, you've got meetings very, very early. But you want to make sure that you're able to some degree, at least take all of those different components, and though they may be shuffled around in the day, be able to work them in. So you have schedule within that. I think one of the traps that a lot of people fall into, and I know I certainly did when I was starting to travel regularly, is I felt like, well, my company is flying me out to this city. So they're paying for my time to be in this city. They're paying for the hotel and my meals. So I'm on the clock the whole time. And so I would, my days regularly would consist of waking up, working through emails, getting ready for, morning meetings, doing morning meetings, having a lunch meeting, have afternoon meetings, maybe go to a dinner event, come back to my hotel room, basically catch up on the work I didn't get done because I was out with customers all day, and then going to sleep. And so it was a full day of work. And, you do that for a length of time, especially on long trips. If you've got a week-long trip, that just really wears you down, and doesn't really put you in a position to be as, to have that high level of performance at all times.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, again, sleep, workflow, exercise, and downtime are all really important things. So
I agree. I think those 4 are a great place for people to start. And I can certainly relate because my travel changed when I was traveling more frequently, when I was getting that sales role. And suddenly I was taking some trips now on a more regular basis, not nearly as much as you, but I noticed that having a few things in my bag that were just so influential to my day and how I felt were really important. And one of the things that you'll laugh at this is taking my bed of nails. So yeah, traveling with my bed of nails.
If you're not familiar with the bed of nails, you can look it up. I was actually not familiar with bed of nails until Michelle got me a bed of nails, which I for some time, I don't have it with me now, but I will occasionally travel with that as well.
Yes. Yeah. And it was just at that point in time when I was doing that travel, having my bed of nails was one thing that really, really helped, because at the time I was traveling, I did have a lot of chronic pain and things happening there. So having that bed of nails, I knew would really enhance my day and give me that downtime, so I could be more effective. And that's what I did. If I went to like a full day conference or something, I would take that time on a break and go spend
Yeah.
20 minutes in the hotel room where I could kind of have that decompressed time. Even as an introvert, having that time where you're not just entertaining or talking or mingling, that was really helpful for me. So prioritizing those 4 categories that you mentioned is a really good place to start.
Yeah. And so when we look at those 4 categories, we'll just kind of go through them pretty quickly. But the first one I talked about is sleep. Okay. And one of the things that is often a challenge, particularly if you're flying to different time zones, there are a lot of people, they have an internal clock where they're going to wake up and get tired at a very specific time every day. And so when you're traveling and you find yourself in a different time zone, that could be a challenge. And I know that particularly if you don't travel very often and you're going, say, from coast to coast or even to Hawaii or over to Europe or Asia or anywhere, that can, when you start getting into that territory, it gets very, very challenging. Fortunately, I only have generally in the US, so it's 3 hours, maybe more if it's Hawaii, but 3 hours. And so my body, I think just because I travel so much, I've been able to adapt very quickly to the different time zones. But if you find yourself where if it's just a 1 or 2 day trip, then you just have to you're going to struggle through it. But if it's a longer trip, you want to, as quickly as possible, try to get yourself onto that, regular schedule. And so, and that can be helpful. I am based in the West Coast. So, a lot of people, is it easier to go from the West Coast to the East Coast or the East Coast to the West Coast? And I always think, it's easier the other way around, because the West Coast means, now I have to wake up earlier. The reality is I wake up early anyway because I do so much work with West Coast folks. But it is something that you need to kind of prepare yourself for, before you leave, is just make sure you get enough sleep, because what you don't want is to deprive yourself of sleep. That's actually probably the biggest thing, especially when we find ourselves if we're traveling for conferences where your schedule is packed with social events, you might not have enough time for sleep. I've been to conferences where, we'll go to dinner events and then we'll end up at a social at a bar or something, and we'll be there till 2, 3 in the morning. And then the expectation is that we've got to be up at 6 for a 7 a.m. meeting. And so how effective are you going to be if you're normally used to getting, 7, 8 hours of sleep, and now it's compressed and you're not giving yourself that? And if you do that day after day after day on a long conference, that can just be very detrimental to your performance. You always have to remind yourself that when you're traveling for work, you're there for work, right? Yes, there are conferences and there are social events, but you always have to make sure that you're prioritizing what your performance is going to be at work, doing what you're supposed to be doing, what you're called to be doing, and really managing yourself in terms of how you go out. Now, I will say that when you have those events, one of the great things, and I'm not saying don't go to those events. Obviously, that social interaction is so meaningful in terms of building the relationships and building that camaraderie. And it's so critical that you don't want to not do that. You just have to make sure that you don't go overboard and you allow yourself that time to recuperate, to rest. So sleep, I think, is just so vitally important.
Yes.
So
yeah, and I think the lens that we can kind of use as our guidelight is we want to prioritize our performance for work, because this is, if a company is paying for you, or if you're a business owner and you're paying for your travel, we want to get the most out of the travel, especially because a lot of these travel times are when people come together. So it's very collaborative kind of time where we can be networking or getting a special project done or something like that. So we want to squeeze as much as we can from that opportunity, but we don't want to sacrifice ourselves in the process. And so I think kind of having that balance there, because I certainly have been around people who travel at the same conferences that I was going at, and they're like, we're the first ones at the meeting and we're the last ones at the end of the day. You know, like we're closing out everybody's bar tab, and we're having fun, and we're everywhere at all times. And for me, there has never been a time in my life where I would be able to commit to something like that. So I need to prioritize my sleep, because it's just I can be kind of useless without it. So I want to make sure that, okay, how can I show up in the right way without feeling like I'm pushing the envelope a little bit too much on what I can handle. Because my work, whether that's my own company, of course, myself, I want myself to do well. But when I worked for someone else, they would have wanted me to take care of myself as well. So
exactly.
Yeah, be effective, but be healthy. It's probably a good perspective for us to when we're planning our travel and when we're thinking about it.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because the last company I worked for, I was on a team, and when we went to the conferences, and there's a significant expense involved in attending and participating in these conferences, where you have a lot of very important decision makers, people that you want to interact with. And the mindset, we had this mantra of first up, last down. So the whole thing was, we were the first ones there at breakfast, we were talking to people, and we were the last people to leave the bar. And that, you can do that, for maybe one day, maybe 2 days. But after a while, how sharp are you, and when you're trying to make a good impression with these potential customers, with the people you want to work with, how, are you going to say things that you shouldn't be saying? I know we talked, and we're not going to talk about it much today, but we talked about how you manage alcohol intake.
Yes.
Because there's an expectation with a lot of these events that there's going to be, it's a kind of a more relaxed environment. People are going to be partaking, but you have to also, I'm not saying don't do that, but you also have to keep in mind, you're there to work. It's a networking event, yes, and you're there to have a good time, but you have to make sure that you're just as sharp. So we talked before about, you can look at listen to one of our previous podcasts on some of the tips for doing that. So sleep, we talked about sleep. We talked about workflow. So how do you maintain the right workflow? If you've got work where you get up in the morning, you get in front of your computer, you've got multiple monitors, and you work through a day, and then you take a break. You've got a set schedule of how you're doing your work. Well, now when you're on the road, things go out the window, right? Your schedule is different. You're at the mercy of whatever the meetings are. How are you getting your work done? How are you getting your work done if you're confined to, say, a laptop and you don't have all those multiple monitors? And so it kind of goes back to, how can you replicate your work environment that you're comfortable with? Or maybe how do you just adapt? I know that oftentimes I'll travel with a HDMI cable, and I have to be careful how I say this. I think there are a lot of hotels who don't appreciate what I do, because I'll actually connect to the television in the hotel room and use that as a monitor as well as an external monitor. There are other things you can do. They sell, different things that you can use. But that's just one of the things that you can do to kind of, make it more like home. Another thing that I do, and it's different for everyone, so do what works best for you, is I know I'm in my hotel room now, I generally don't work in my hotel room. For me, the hotel room is where I sleep. It's where I have my downtime. So I'll usually go down to the lobby and work there. And now people might think, well, maybe you're different. Maybe you want the solitude of a hotel room to get the work done, and maybe the lobby is too noisy and such. But I'm able to kind of tune that out. I do a lot of work in coffee shops, so I'm used to kind of tuning that out. If you have to do a conference call or a podcast, obviously we want the quiet. but those are just some of the things. Is you want to manage your workflow, and then also track the time that you're putting in, because there's the expectation is not that you're working from the time you wake up in the morning to the time you go to sleep. So manage that. So workflow, maintaining that workflow is really important. So.
And I'll add, even having a list, or if that's a mental list or a physical list, I think a physical list can be really helpful for us, especially if you're not a frequent every month you're going to multiple destinations, that type of traveler. For me, I know that, okay, I do want a couple of things with my workflow. You'll laugh at this because it seems so basic, but my mouse, I have to have my mouse. If I just have my laptop in that little tiny block where I'm supposed to move my finger to move the mouse, that doesn't work for me. I can't deal with that. I will go to Walmart or Target or Best Buy and I will get myself a new mouse, because that's one of the things that's part of my workflow that I really need. And there's like a storage and external storage drive that has my files on it. So there's a few things that are absolutely essential to me being able to complete tasks in a comfortable way, the way that I'm used to at my house when I have all of the amenities and everything at my reach, basically. So having that list, physical or mental, is a really great place to just keep us reminded. If we don't have a separate go bag, if we don't have that separate bag that just has the things that we need in it and we just grab our laptop and go, we want that list so we don't forget.
Yeah. Okay. So we talked about sleep, workflow. Want to talk about food or nutrition, eating, right? Yes. And again, when we're trying to stick to a certain nutritional plan or eat certain things or not, you want to make sure that you're able to maintain that. Now, you can't always do that. Sometimes there are things that unless you bring a juicer with you, there are certain things you just aren't going to be able to do, and so that's okay. But generally, you want to try to maintain it as much as possible. And some of the things that I like to do is, when I'm going to be traveling, is I will have in my bag just some very simple snacks, and usually it's something like a bag of almonds or something like that, something that's easy, so that if for some reason, because of my schedule, I'm unable to, if I miss a meal, if I miss lunch or something because we're going from meeting to meeting, then I know I have something that will enable me to maintain the level of energy that I need to get through the day. But it's not gonna, tempt me to just run quick to the first burger place and grab a burger or a taco and shove it in my mouth and be done with. So look at what are different ways that you can kind of curb that temptation to veer from what your nutrition plan is, if you have a nutrition plan. Having said that, I always like, depending on where I'm at, is, when you're traveling, is you talked before about kind of the experience, right? Enjoying that experience. And part of that experience is enjoying the cuisine in whatever locale we're in. So for instance, in Chicago, you think, I'm going to have pizza, I'm going to have a hot dog.
And a steak.
And Malort. Malort. Okay, maybe not Malort. If you don't know Malort, you should learn it. But if I'm in Texas, it's breakfast tacos and kolaches, and so there are things that I allow myself to enjoy because I'm in those areas. Ohio, Skyline chili. So many things. Just I've got in my travels, I've been able to compile extensively. Nebraska runs that. So many great places to go. Now, many of these places may not be at the top of anyone's nutritional list, but they are ways that you can kind of enjoy that full experience. But at the same time, you do want to be, take care to stick to whatever, diet you may have for yourself. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the areas where I sort of say, allow yourself to enjoy it. I had a coworker who, again, everyone's different. I had a coworker who, whenever we went out of town, he wanted to go to all the chain restaurants that he was used to going to. And I was kind of the opposite. I said, no, let's go to, this is the best Italian place in this town. And his mindset was, because he was away from home, by going to a place where the food is exactly the way he's used to, in a restaurant that looks exactly the way he's used to, then it made him feel like he was more at home. Mm-hmm. And for him, that was what made sense. It was to try to bring things you're familiar with together to ground yourself so that you have that same mindset. So,
yeah. And to speak as somebody who has some food challenges, when I'm, wherever I am, wherever I go, there I am with my gluten-free and different preferences that I have. I can relate to going to a place that, especially if you're the one who has to do the research before, where you're like, okay, what can I have, and having that consistency, versus for me, it can be really challenging sometimes even to go to a really ethnic place, because sometimes the communication, they're really not sure. Oh, you don't eat gluten. Everything has gluten, or nothing has gluten, and they just don't know what it is. So it can be a little bit comforting to know, okay, I have lunch handled in my head. Yeah. Like, I know some options there. And I know for me, doing a lot of entertaining, I never wanted to inconvenience anyone. And so it was a lot of just, you got to be flexible on the go. You got to eat the salad, suffer through it, whatever it might be. So I can relate to both, because I love trying some new restaurants and getting these new, like the ambiance of a new place, and every city has these like special gems. But also, one of the reasons why I still go to Starbucks is because there's that consistency with Starbucks. Whereas if I go to a different coffee shop, sometimes the coffee's really bitter, and it's, not as enjoyable. So,
and Starbucks, they're not yet one of our sponsors, but they can be. But I'll say that there is something to be said. I mentioned before, I work, when I travel, oftentimes I'm between meetings and I have to find a place to get some work, get some emails done. And Starbucks is a pretty consistent place to go. Generally speaking, depending on where you're at, they usually have outlets so you can plug in. They'll usually have Wi-Fi that you can connect to. And, you order a cup of coffee and there's no pressure for you to hurry up and get out of there. It's an expectation that you can sit there and use it as a remote office and get work done. And so that's something that I do quite a bit. I will say they tend to be fairly noisy, depending on which location you're at. So if you're taking a lot of phone calls, or especially if you're having a conference call or a Zoom meeting or something like that, it may not be the best place, but it's certainly a great place to just get work done. And they have coffee, but they don't have a lot of food options that it's not, I'm not going to eat a lot while I'm there. They have some food options, but I'm not going to sit there, be bored, and be, eating a cheeseburger while I'm working. Yeah. So work. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is making sure that you schedule into your day some sort of downtime. And again, this is important during your normal day. We talked in a previous episode about how important it is to, break up your day, go out for a walk, do something, enjoy some leisure time. As you had referenced, I do bring a guitar with me to on most trips. And I could do we could do a whole episode on travel guitars, but I don't know that too many people in the audience would be so interested. I've done a lot of research on that, but so yes, when you bring something that as big as, it could be as cumbersome as a guitar, that does lead to, additional stress. Like, that's why I have to make sure that I have the right boarding number so that I can get that overhead. But what I've found is that that inconvenience, if you will, is worth it, because
Mhm.
now that's, when I'm at home at the end of the day, that's something that I can do to relax. It's something that it brings me, I enjoy it. And so I can get that same level of enjoyment when I'm on the road. What I was finding before I did this is I would have to find like a guitar store to go to and just sit there, and that's not ideal.
Right.
So whether it be, bringing a guitar, I bring books with me, things that you do if you, um, I have friends who they do a lot of climbing, and so, bring your rock climbing shoes and find a climbing gym. There are so many things that you can do, but the key is that you do something. You want to make sure that you give yourself that breather, you give yourself that break, so that you have that downtime. The other thing I like to do is, especially if you're in a city that you've never been in before, is take advantage of the fact that you're there. You're this
Mhm.
accidental tourist where you're able to look at, you can just really take in, enjoy the history, enjoy the culture of an area. And so if you have the time, do that. First and foremost, you're there to get the work done, but you also have to schedule some time in between. I've had, I've been able to, I like to hike a lot. And so I've been able to hike all over the world because I was able to schedule that as part of my normal trips. And
Mhm.
so been able to go to museums and sporting events and concerts and things like that. Just take a look and give yourself that kind of that extra experience while you're in that town.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to bring some joy to the
Exactly.
experience. If you're an adventurous soul, for sure, go check it out and do a little bit of planning before you get
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that if you do the planning, you can really enjoy the experience. Give yourself, understand that things are going to happen, and have that, be able to roll with it. And if there are flight delays, if something doesn't go exactly the way is planned, just take it easy, take a deep breath, and kind of just roll with that. So we talked a lot about different things that you can do to maintain a routine, but it's really more about creating a travel routine if you're a regular traveler. And the things that we really want to emphasize is to not let things like sleep or downtime, or eating, keeping your nutrition, first and foremost, don't let those things go by the wayside just because you're not in an environment that you're used to. Adopt habits, adopt routines that are consistent with what you normally want to do on a regular basis, that you can apply while you're on the road. So, kind of to wrap this all up, kind of the takeaways from this is, think about what do you do when you're preparing for a trip. Are you someone, what are your important routines, and what is going to cause you the most discomfort? Is it that being pressed for time, or is it not having those creature comforts, close at hand? And then plan your packing schedule, your packing and your travel schedule around that in such a way that you can really create an environment where you have optimal level of performance. And so kind of the ask is, what are ways that you can maintain your routines while you're not in your regular area? And if you've got tips or anything like that, you can shoot them over to us. If you're interested in travel guitar tips, I can answer that. If you want to know where to eat in certain cities, I've got some great recommendations. But yeah, I think these are some of the things that we'll continue to be talking about, because it's all about maintaining the highest level of performance, getting your work done, while ensuring that you're still not losing your mind.
Yes. Yes.
All right.
Great tips, Devin. Thank you.
All right.
From
All
a
right.
travel expert, right?
I travel quite a bit, so
Yeah.
I get to do this a lot. So
Awesome.
so
Well, thank
important. So
you
okay.
everyone for joining us, and we will see you in the next one.